What if the Duchess we thought was the fairy tale bride, the modern Cinderella, was never really that at all? What if the carefully polished image that dazzled the world was less about love and more about control? These are not comfortable questions, but they are the ones that have haunted Meghan Markle since the moment she stepped into the royal spotlight. And perhaps the most unsettling part of this story is that every time we think we've heard it all, another contradiction, another twist, another accusation comes crashing down. Think about it. Here was a woman who, in 2017, was hailed as the future of a modern monarchy. She was young, glamorous, biracial, outspoken, everything the British royal family wasn't, and everything it supposedly needed. The press loved her. Crowds cheered for her. People around the world saw her as a symbol of progress, of inclusion, of hope. Meghan Markle was supposed to save the monarchy. And yet, within just a few short years, she had become one of the most polarizing women alive. Admired by some, despised by many. How does that happen? How does a person go from national treasure to public villain in record time? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. That's where this story begins, with the sharpest of contradictions. Because the Meghan Markle story is not just about one woman marrying into royalty. It's about perception. It's about manipulation. It's about how a narrative can be crafted, sold, and shattered. It's about lies, or at least accusations of lies. And it's about betrayal, not just of people, but of ideals. Now, here's the catch. Meghan is not the first controversial royal figure. Princess Diana, Fergie the Duchess of York, even King Edward VIII before them all. Scandals are part of the royal package. But Meghan's story feels different. Why? Because this is not just a royal drama contained within Buckingham Palace walls. This is a battle fought in real time, on television, in interviews, on social media. A global soap opera where every word, every look, every tear is dissected, amplified, and questioned. And Meghan, whether by strategy or by circumstance, is at the very center of it. But let's be honest, the question most people ask is not, what happened to Meghan? The real question is, why does everyone hate Meghan Markle? Why do headlines, forums, and whispers paint her as manipulative, deceitful, or even dangerous? Why do so many accuse her of tearing Harry away from his family, of playing the victim, of profiting off the very institution she claimed destroyed her? Let's start peeling this apart. Because to understand the hate, we need to understand the performance. And yes, the accusations of performance are central to this saga. Remember the infamous bridesmaid dress drama? Depending on whose version you believe, either Meghan made Kate cry, or Kate made Meghan cry. Meghan claimed in her Oprah interview that the truth had been twisted against her, that it was actually Kate who reduced her to tears. But palace insiders, and even reporters who were around at the time, told a different story. So who's lying? Who's manipulating? And why does this moment matter so much? Because it was the first domino. The first sign that Meghan's version of events might not always align with everyone else's. And that contradiction would follow her forever. And then, of course, came Oprah. That sit-down interview in 2021 was supposed to be Meghan and Harry's chance to tell their truth. Their voice, unfiltered, finally heard. The problem? Almost immediately, fact-checkers and critics began pulling apart their claims. From questions about the timeline of Archie's supposed denied title, to Meghan's statements about not knowing who Harry really was before they met. Contradictions piled up. Was she misinformed? Was she bending the truth? Or was she deliberately shaping a narrative to win sympathy? That's the heart of the manipulation accusation, that Meghan knows how to position herself not as the antagonist, but as the perpetual victim. And you know what? Playing the victim works. It always has. It generates sympathy, it silences critics, it creates loyalty. But here's the catch. If you play that card too often, people stop believing you. They start questioning. They start seeing patterns. And with Meghan, the patterns became impossible to ignore. The timing of her revelations, the language she used, the way every issue, no matter how large or small, seemed to circle back to her being the wronged party. That kind of consistency is either terrifying bad luck or a strategy. And once the public starts suspecting strategy, it's game over. But of course, the Meghan story is not just about Meghan. It's about Harry. The once beloved prince who laughed with William, who comforted Diana's mourners, who was adored as the cheeky spare. How did Harry become estranged from his family? How did a man so deeply connected to his brother, to his father, to the very institution that raised him, suddenly cut ties and flee to California? Many blame Meghan. They say she drove the wedge. They say she isolated Harry, pulled him away from the people who loved him most. Is that fair? Or is that an oversimplification? Ask yourself this. Have you ever had a friend or family member who suddenly cut ties, seemingly overnight, because of a new relationship? Did it feel like their partner was whispering in their ear, rewriting the story of their past? That's how many people see Harry's break from the royals. And once again, Meghan is at the center of it. And yet, here's the contradiction again. Meghan speaks passionately about family. She talks about protecting her children, about shielding her husband, about wanting love and safety. How can someone who claims to value family so much be accused of destroying another? That tension is what fuels so much resentment. People hate hypocrisy. They hate when words don't match actions. And Meghan, more than almost anyone else in recent memory, has been accused of living in that hypocrisy. Think about her stance on privacy. She and Harry left royal life, we were told, because they wanted privacy. And yet, Netflix deals, Spotify podcasts, a memoir called Spare, stage paparazzi shots. Privacy or profit? Which is it? And what does that contradiction tell us about the image Meghan cultivates? And then there's climate change. Meghan and Harry speak passionately about saving the planet, lowering carbon footprints, protecting future generations. Noble goals, no doubt. And yet, they're photographed boarding private jets again and again. Does that invalidate their message? Maybe not entirely. But does it look hypocritical? Absolutely. And in public perception, looking hypocritical is often worse than being wrong, because it suggests you don't believe your own words. All of these moments, the bridesmaid dress, the Oprah claims, the family feud, the hypocrisy, they don't just create gossip. They create mistrust. They fuel the sense that Meghan is not who she says she is. And mistrust is the ultimate poison. Once people stop trusting you, they don't just question your past. They question everything you say moving forward. And that is Meghan Markle's biggest problem. But here's where this story gets darker. Because Meghan is not just mistrusted. She's hated. She is, for many, a symbol of manipulation, deceit, and betrayal. How did we get here? How does a duchess once hailed as a modernizer end up vilified as a manipulator? To answer that, we have to go back. Back to the fairy tale beginning. Back to the moment Meghan walked into the royal family and charmed the world. Back to when everything looked perfect, before the cracks began to show. Because as we'll see, the seeds of resentment were planted long before Oprah, long before California, long before Netflix. They were planted in the earliest days of Meghan's royal life. In the very moments when the world thought it was watching a love story for the ages. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Imagine it, May 2018. The world is watching Windsor Castle. Millions tuned in live. Billions more saw the images replayed across screens. A young American actress, Meghan Markle, is walking down the aisle to marry Prince Harry, the most eligible royal bachelor alive. It was supposed to be the modern fairy tale. A biracial divorcee from Hollywood joining the most traditional monarchy in the world. It was groundbreaking, it was historic, it was irresistible. And for a brief moment, it seemed like Meghan Markle had everything. The press adored her. The public celebrated her. The royal family welcomed her with open arms, at least on the surface. But here's the shocking twist. Within just a couple of years, all of that adoration had curdled into suspicion, criticism, and in some corners, outright hate. How did that happen? How does someone go from being the world's darling duchess to one of the most controversial figures in modern royal history? To answer that, we have to start with the beginning, the glittering entrance that captivated millions. Because sometimes, it's in the perfect beginning that the seeds of downfall are planted. The truth is, Meghan's entrance wasn't just about love. It was about symbolism. She was the first mixed-race woman to marry into the royal family. She was an outsider. She was ambitious. And she wasn't shy about it. To the media, that was gold. For years, the royal family had been accused of being out of touch, stuck in the past, and disconnected from modern Britain. Meghan seemed like the cure. A fresh face, a modern voice, A duchess who wasn't afraid to speak. Do you remember the headlines back then? A breath of fresh air for the monarchy. The woman who will modernize the royals. The press couldn't get enough of her. Her fashion choices sold out within hours. Her speeches were dissected with awe. Crowds screamed her name. People wanted to believe in her. They wanted to see Meghan as the bridge between the old and the new. But was that ever realistic? Could anyone live up to such impossible expectations? Or was Meghan set up to fail from the very beginning? Let's pause on that for a moment. Imagine stepping into one of the most ancient, rigid institutions on Earth, with centuries of tradition weighing down every step you take. Now imagine doing it not as someone born into that system, but as someone who lived an entirely different life. Hollywood sets, Instagram followers, personal independence. That clash of worlds was always going to be explosive. But Meghan didn't just step into the palace. She walked in like she belonged there. And that confidence, or arrogance, depending on who you ask, immediately raised eyebrows behind the scenes. Think about it. Royal brides are usually expected to ease into the role. Kate Middleton spent nearly a decade by William's side before marrying him, slowly learning the ropes, understanding the unspoken rules. Meghan had no such training period. Within 2 years of dating Harry, she was engaged. Within 3, she was married. And almost instantly, she was speaking out on topics like feminism, race, and equality. Powerful issues, yes, but ones the royal family traditionally avoids because of their political edge. To her supporters, Meghan was brave, authentic, refreshing. To her critics, she was reckless, attention-seeking, and disrespectful of tradition. That split was there from the beginning. But here's where the story gets interesting. Meghan didn't just marry Harry. She changed him. Harry had always been the cheeky spare, the wild one, the soldier who went to war, the man who dressed up in questionable costumes at parties. But he was also the prince who adored his brother, who respected the queen, who played his role, even if reluctantly. When Meghan came into his life, that all changed. He wasn't just Harry the prince anymore. He became Harry and Meghan. They were a brand, a partnership, a force. And that's when the whispers began. Was Meghan leading Harry? Was she the one making decisions? Was she encouraging him to step away from his family, from his duties, from his heritage? To many royal watchers, Meghan wasn't just a new duchess. She was the woman pulling Harry out of the monarchy and out of the grasp of those who wanted him to stay loyal. Ask yourself this. Have you ever seen someone in your life transform completely after falling in love? Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. That's how people saw Harry. They didn't see him making choices. They saw Meghan making them for him. And fair or not, that perception became reality in the public eye. Now, let's not forget the theatrics of that wedding day. The gospel choir, the fiery American preacher, the subtle touches of Meghan's identity woven into a very British ceremony. Some praised it as a beautiful blending of cultures. Others saw it as Meghan stamping her mark on a monarchy that never asked to be rebranded. That moment, that very moment, was when many insiders realized Meghan wasn't going to play by the old rules. And you know what? That's exactly why so many people loved her. She was different. She was bold. She wasn't afraid to be herself. But that very same boldness would soon be interpreted as defiance, arrogance, and manipulation. Because in the royal family, individuality isn't celebrated. It's seen as a threat. Still, at the start, the fairy tale held strong. Meghan glowed on the balcony. Harry beamed by her side. The crowds roared with approval. The press churned out glowing headlines. For a while, it seemed unstoppable. But just beneath the glittering surface, resentment was building. Within the palace, within the media, and yes, within the public. Because here's the dark truth. People love to build up heroes so they can tear them down. Meghan Markle was no exception. She was raised up as the savior of the monarchy. And when she didn't deliver perfection, when the cracks began to show, the backlash was inevitable, and it was brutal. And that's where we need to go next. Because it didn't take long for those cracks to appear. And when they did, they revealed not just small disagreements, but a family feud so bitter it would divide brothers, alienate a father, and shake the monarchy itself. It all started with a dress. A little white dress for a little girl, and a fight that would set the stage for years of accusations and counter-accusations. A fight that would turn sisters-in-law into rivals in the public eye. A fight that would make Meghan the villain of the royal household. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It was supposed to be nothing more than a wedding detail. A bridesmaid dress fitting, a handful of fabric, a few stitches, and the laughter of children playing dress-up in satin. But in the gilded world of Windsor Castle, even the smallest disagreements can ignite into firestorms. And this one would become the spark that set an entire narrative ablaze. Picture it, Meghan Markle preparing for her royal wedding to Prince Harry. Kate Middleton, the poised Duchess of Cambridge, helping to ensure her daughter, Princess Charlotte, would look perfect in her role as a flower girl. The scene should have been sweet, harmonious, even forgettable. Yet what happened behind those palace walls has become one of the most hotly debated royal stories in modern memory. Why? Because the accounts of that day and the emotional fallout are completely contradictory. On one side, palace insiders whispered that Meghan made Kate cry, that she was demanding, difficult, unwilling to compromise. That Kate, always composed and diplomatic, was reduced to tears after a confrontation over Charlotte's dress. For the press, this was a delicious story. The radiant new Duchess-to-be versus the beloved future queen. The outsider clashing with the establishment. But then, years later, Meghan told a very different version on global television. Sitting opposite Oprah Winfrey, she leaned in and, with calm certainty, said, "The reverse happened." Meghan insisted it was Kate who made her cry, not the other way around. She claimed she had been wronged, that the palace had let a false narrative fester, and that she had been forced to suffer in silence as the villain of the tale. So which was it? Did Meghan bully Kate? Or did Kate upset Meghan? And more importantly, why does this detail matter so much? Let's pause here. Imagine for a moment that you're preparing for your wedding. Stress is high, emotions are raw, and everyone wants perfection. A disagreement over a child's dress isn't unusual. It happens in families all the time. But in the royal family, there is no such thing as just family. Every word, every look, every gesture is magnified. And this one moment, whether small or monumental, became a prism through which the public began to judge Meghan Markle's entire character. Ask yourself this. Why would Meghan wait years to share her side? Why didn't the palace clarify sooner? Was it a simple misunderstanding left unchecked? Or was it something else, a deliberate manipulation of the story to cast Meghan in a negative light? Or perhaps a convenient truth twisting by Meghan herself to elicit sympathy later? This is where the accusations of lying and manipulation begin to take root. Because for critics, Meghan's reversal of the story wasn't just about the dress. It was about trust. If her version of events clashed so sharply with earlier accounts, what else might she have exaggerated, altered, or spun? And there's another layer. In her Oprah interview, Meghan added that Kate had apologized afterward, even bringing flowers as a peace offering. On the surface, that sounds gracious, even healing. But to many, it raised more questions. Was Meghan sharing this detail to appear forgiving? To elevate herself as the bigger person? Or was she carefully framing the narrative to put Kate in the wrong and herself in the role of victim-turned-saint? This is the contradiction that drives so much of Meghan's story. No one outside those palace walls truly knows what happened that day. Yet the battle over the bridesmaid dress has become symbolic. To Meghan's supporters, it proves she was scapegoated, unfairly painted as a diva when she was the one who suffered. To her critics, it's proof she will twist even the smallest story to suit her own image. Now, let's dig deeper. The timing of Meghan's version of events was not random. It came during the Oprah interview, arguably the most explosive media moment in modern royal history. The interview wasn't just a conversation. It was a carefully orchestrated performance, complete with lighting, camera angles, and strategically placed revelations. Meghan's correction of the Kate cried story was one of the interview's headline-making moments. It dominated news cycles for days. It reframed the relationship between Meghan and Kate, turning years of speculation on its head. But was that reframing authentic, or was it calculated? Here's where audience perception matters. People hate feeling misled. If Meghan was indeed wronged, then the palace and press allowed a falsehood to damage her reputation for years. But if Meghan was stretching the truth in Oprah's garden, then she was deliberately playing with public emotion on the biggest stage imaginable. And either way, trust eroded. And here's the irony. The bridesmaid dress drama was not about politics, money, or global issues. It was about fabric, hymns, and tears. Yet it exploded because it symbolized something far bigger. Two women representing two worlds. Kate, the dutiful, traditional royal, embodying stability. Meghan, the outspoken, modern duchess, embodying disruption. Their supposed clash over Charlotte's dress became a metaphor for the clash between tradition and change, and between truth and spin. But the story doesn't end there. Because once the public began questioning Meghan's truthfulness about the dress, they began re-examining everything else she said. Every claim in the Oprah interview, every anecdote in public speeches, every declaration of victimhood was now filtered through a lens of suspicion. Was this another bridesmaid dress moment? Another contradiction waiting to be exposed? This was the domino effect. One disputed memory triggering a cascade of mistrust. And mistrust, once it takes root, spreads fast. But let's not forget the emotional cost. Meghan herself described the aftermath as deeply painful. She said it marked the beginning of her vilification in the press, that she was silenced while lies spread unchecked. Whether you believe her or not, the emotional weight she attached to the moment gave it power. Tears, real or alleged, became the currency of truth. And in Meghan's telling, she was the one shedding them. So what's the takeaway here? It's not really about who cried. It's about who controlled the story. And from that day forward, Meghan was determined to control hers. But here's the cliffhanger. The bridesmaid dress drama wasn't an isolated scandal. It was the first of many contradictions, the first of many accusations, the first hint that Meghan's relationship with truth would become the most controversial part of her life as a royal. And the next stage, the global platform of Oprah, would take those contradictions and amplify them to a scale the monarchy had never faced before. Because when Meghan sat down under the California sun and told her story, the world listened. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The garden was serene. Oprah leaned forward, her face solemn, her voice heavy with anticipation. The cameras zoomed in, and then Meghan Markle spoke. With that single interview in March 2021, the Duchess of Sussex detonated a bomb under the monarchy, one that would reverberate around the world. This was no ordinary television moment. This was confession, confrontation, and spectacle all at once. Broadcast to millions, replayed endlessly on YouTube and social media, Meghan's words carved fault lines not just through her family, but through the entire institution of the British monarchy. For the first time, we weren't just guessing about tensions inside the palace. We were hearing them, unfiltered, from Harry and Meghan themselves. Or at least, that's how it was presented. But was it the unvarnished truth? Or was it another performance, carefully constructed to sway global opinion? Let's start with the biggest revelation, the allegation that someone within the royal family expressed concerns about how dark Archie's skin might be before he was born. It was shocking. It was damning. It painted the monarchy, already struggling with a colonial past, as racist at its core. The fallout was immediate. Newspapers blazed with headlines. Celebrities weighed in. Politicians condemned. But almost as quickly, questions began to surface. Who exactly said it? Meghan refused to name the person. Harry refused too, adding later that it wasn't the Queen or Prince Philip. So who was it? William? Charles? Someone else? This ambiguity created a perfect storm. To Meghan's supporters, it confirmed that she had endured racist treatment inside the palace. To her critics, it felt like a masterstroke of manipulation, a vague accusation powerful enough to shock, but impossible to prove or disprove. A story with no clear resolution, but maximum emotional impact. And then came the contradictions. Meghan claimed that her son Archie had been denied the title of prince because of his race. But according to royal protocol, Archie was never entitled to that title until Charles became king. The rules were written more than a century ago. Was Meghan misinformed? Or was she deliberately bending the facts to make the monarchy look cruel and discriminatory? And remember her claim that she and Harry were married in secret, days before the public ceremony? The Archbishop of Canterbury himself later denied that. The legal documents confirmed the wedding at Windsor was the only official one. Again, was this a misunderstanding or a lie told for dramatic effect? These moments piled up. Each revelation, each tearful confession, came with a shadow, a nagging question mark. And once the audience spots one inconsistency, Every other statement becomes suspect. But Oprah's interview wasn't just about facts. It was about feelings. Meghan spoke of suicidal thoughts. She described begging for help and being turned away. She said palace officials told her it would look bad if she sought treatment. That detail shocked viewers, chilled them. Because if true, it wasn't just a failure of family. It was a failure of humanity. But even here, contradictions crept in. Some staff insiders claimed Meghan never asked for professional help. Others suggested she was offered support but refused. The truth, again, remained murky. And that's the brilliance, or the danger, of the Oprah interview. Meghan and Harry didn't need to prove every detail. They only needed to paint a picture, to create an emotional truth powerful enough to overshadow the factual gaps. Because emotions stick, pain resonates, tears convince. And Meghan knew exactly how to deliver those moments. Ask yourself this. When you think of that interview, what do you remember most? The accusations of racism? The suicidal thoughts? The silence of the palace? Chances are, you don't remember the contradictions. You remember the feelings. That's the art of storytelling. That's the art of narrative control. And Meghan isn't the only one who benefited. Oprah herself became part of the drama. Every nod, every gasp, every carefully timed pause amplified Meghan's words. It wasn't just journalism, it was theater. And the audience was captivated. For Meghan, it was the ultimate chance to rewrite her story, to shift from villain to victim, from manipulator to martyr. But here's the twist. The very interview designed to win her sympathy also deepened mistrust. Because while some viewers were moved to tears, others were rolling their eyes. The inconsistencies, the vagueness, the emotional precision, to many, it felt rehearsed, like a script. And the more Meghan insisted she was speaking her truth, the more people wondered, why not just speak the truth? That phrase, my truth, became a lightning rod. Supporters embraced it as a symbol of empowerment. Critics tore it apart as a shield for lies. Because here's the uncomfortable reality. If truth is only ever subjective, then anything can be true. And in that ambiguity, Meghan thrived. But let's not forget Harry. His contributions were just as damning. He spoke of feeling trapped in the monarchy. He accused his father of cutting him off financially, of refusing his calls. He described a family cold to his wife's suffering, unwilling to protect her. Powerful words. Yet again, fact-checkers noted contradictions. Harry had inherited millions from Diana's estate. Financial documents suggested he wasn't left penniless. And palace sources claimed Charles did support them financially for a time, though the Sussexes wanted more independence. So who do we believe? The smiling Duke and Duchess in Oprah's garden? Or the quiet, unnamed sources contradicting them from the palace? This is the essence of the Meghan debate. On one hand, she presents herself as the wronged woman, silenced, bullied, attacked. On the other hand, she's accused of being a master manipulator, carefully shaping half-truths into bombshells designed to destroy her enemies and elevate herself. And here's where things get even darker. The Oprah interview didn't just fracture Meghan's relationship with the palace. It fractured Harry's relationship with his brother. William's fury, Charles's coldness, the Queen's sorrow, the fallout was devastating. The interview was not just a bombshell. It was a declaration of war. But wars have casualties. And after Oprah, the battlefield only grew bloodier. Because if Meghan thought this interview would secure her legacy as the sympathetic heroine, she underestimated how deeply contradictions stick. Once the dust settled, the public began to ask questions she couldn't easily answer. And those questions would haunt her. Still, the Oprah interview remains the defining moment of Meghan's royal saga. It was bold, emotional, divisive. It turned her into a symbol of victimhood for some, and a symbol of deceit for others. It was the point of no return. But here's the thing about battles for truth. Once you play the victim card, you have to keep playing it. You have to double down, escalate, find new stories to prove your pain. And that's exactly what Meghan did next. Because the Oprah interview wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a much larger narrative, one where Meghan would claim victimhood again and again, in new forms, with new accusations. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. She sat in front of the cameras, eyes glistening, her voice soft but steady. I just wanted to survive. It was a line meant to resonate with millions, and it did. Meghan Markle's story, from Hollywood actress to royal duchess to global outcast, was built on one recurring theme: victimhood. Again and again, she positioned herself as the woman wronged, the woman misunderstood, the woman crushed by an ancient institution unwilling to embrace her. And yet, with every tearful confession, every carefully framed revelation, a question lingered. Was this sincerity, or was it strategy? This is where the Meghan Markle story becomes most polarizing, because playing the victim is a powerful narrative device. It tugs at emotions, it garners sympathy, it silences critics. But play it too often, and it begins to look like a performance. And Meghan, for many, has played that card one too many times. Let's start with her claims about being silenced. Meghan told Oprah that palace officials forbade her from speaking, from defending herself, from correcting lies in the press. She painted a picture of isolation. A woman trapped in gilded cages, stripped of her voice, denied her humanity. To her supporters, this was heartbreaking proof of cruelty within the palace. To her detractors, it was an exaggeration, even a lie. After all, Meghan continued to attend public events, deliver speeches, and work with charities. Silenced, or simply restrained by royal protocol, just as every other member of the firm has been for generations. And then there were the tears. Meghan spoke of crying before the royal wedding, of crying after being criticized, of crying under the weight of relentless scrutiny. Each time, she presented herself as the fragile outsider battered by an unforgiving system. But here's the contradiction. Behind closed doors, staff members described her as demanding, assertive, even bullying. Which Meghan is real? The tearful victim on camera, or the commanding duchess behind palace walls? Ask yourself this. How do you know when someone is truly a victim, and when they are playing the role of one? Is it the emotion in their eyes? The consistency of their story? Or is it something deeper? The sense that they are hiding power behind the mask of weakness? With Meghan, that uncertainty is constant. Consider her lawsuit against the Mail on Sunday for publishing her private letter to her father. In court, Meghan portrayed herself as deeply violated, her privacy shattered. But later, evidence revealed she and Harry had cooperated with the authors of Finding Freedom, a biography sympathetic to their story. Meghan was forced to admit she had forgotten about emails suggesting her involvement. Critics seized on this as proof of manipulation, playing the victim of press intrusion while simultaneously feeding the press when it suited her. Privacy, yes, but only on her terms. And then there's the issue of family. Meghan has often spoken of being abandoned, unsupported, cut off. She claimed she lost her father, her half-siblings betrayed her, the royals failed to protect her. She even suggested she had no one to turn to during her darkest moments. Yet, at the same time, she has been accused of cutting off others, of ghosting old friends, of creating a bubble around herself and Harry. Is she the woman everyone leaves? Or is she the one who does the leaving? Again, the contradiction feeds the narrative. Now let's talk about timing. Meghan's victimhood stories often emerge at pivotal moments. The Oprah interview aired just as Harry and Meghan were cementing their new media deals. Later revelations about palace cruelty surfaced alongside their Netflix series. Each disclosure seemed perfectly timed to maximize impact and to maximize profit. Coincidence? Or careful orchestration? Here's the irony. Meghan's insistence on being seen as a victim has, in many ways, made her look like anything but one. Because true victims rarely control the narrative. They don't have Netflix cameras following them, Spotify contracts amplifying them, or a global stage to retell their trauma. Meghan does, and that creates dissonance. How can someone with so much power, so much reach, so much money still insist on being powerless? But let's not underestimate the emotional resonance. For women around the world who have felt silenced, who have felt gaslit, who have felt unsupported, Meghan's story is relatable. She taps into universal fears, being dismissed, being ignored, being crushed by systems bigger than you. That relatability is why she still has passionate defenders. Yet for others, the constant return to victimhood feels like overkill, like a card played once too often. And Harry? He reinforces her narrative. He speaks of watching history repeat itself, of Meghan suffering like Diana. The comparison is powerful. Diana as the ultimate victim of the monarchy, Meghan cast as her modern reflection. But does it hold? Diana's struggles unfolded in an era without Netflix, without Instagram, without billion-dollar deals. Diana died because the press pursued her. Meghan profits because the press pursues her. The parallel, for many, doesn't quite fit. So what's really going on here? Meghan is a master of framing. By positioning herself as the victim, she ensures that every critic looks like a bully. Every attack becomes proof of her suffering. Every contradiction can be excused as trauma. It's a shield, and a sharp one at that. But like all shields, it has cracks. And when the cracks show, the backlash is brutal. Because once the public suspects manipulation, the entire story collapses. The bridesmaid dress drama, the Oprah contradictions, the privacy lawsuits. Each one, on its own, might have been forgivable. But together, they form a pattern. A pattern critics say proves Meghan isn't just unlucky. She's strategic. And here lies the cliffhanger. If Meghan's greatest weapon is her ability to play the victim, then what happens when the world stops believing her? What happens when her tears no longer move hearts? When her revelations no longer shock? When her stories sound like rehearsed scripts instead of raw truth? Because that moment, the moment when sympathy turns to suspicion, is the moment everything changes. And for Meghan Markle, that moment arrived sooner than anyone could have predicted. And it arrived in the form of a feud. A feud not with the press, not with her father, but with the very heart of the monarchy itself. The family she married into. The family she claimed destroyed her. The family that, some say, she herself helped destroy. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It started as whispers, subtle shifts in body language, stiff smiles on the balcony, quick glances that carried more weight than words. To the public, it looked like nothing at first. To the palace, it was the beginning of a storm. And then suddenly, it was undeniable. The royal family feud had ignited, and at the center of it all stood Meghan Markle. This was not just a disagreement over protocol. This was not a petty fight about titles or tiaras. This was a fracture at the very heart of the monarchy, a wound that spread from brother to brother, from father to son, from queen to country. And the woman many blamed, fairly or unfairly, was Meghan. Think about it. For decades, William and Harry had been the unbreakable pair. They were Diana's boys, bonded by tragedy, adored by the public. Through their mother's death, through their wild youth, through their early years of duty, they were inseparable. William, the heir. Harry, the spare. Different roles, but one team. The image of them walking side by side behind their mother's coffin is etched into history. That bond was supposed to last a lifetime. But then Meghan came into the picture. At first, it seemed fine. William and Kate welcomed her, or so it appeared. The Fab Four, as the media dubbed them, looked like a dream team. Young, glamorous royals tackling modern issues together. The future of the monarchy seemed secure. But behind the glossy photos, tension brewed. Reports began to leak. William had allegedly expressed concern about how quickly Harry was moving with Meghan. He urged caution. Harry, fiercely protective of Meghan, saw it as judgment. The conversation reportedly ended in bitterness, planting the first seed of division. From that moment, something shifted. The cracks grew wider. Meghan and Kate were compared endlessly in the press. Their fashion, their demeanor, their parenting styles. Stories painted Meghan as demanding and difficult, while Kate was cast as graceful and dutiful. Whether true or not, these portrayals fueled resentment. Harry believed Meghan was being treated unfairly. William believed Harry was overreacting. And just like that, the brothers who once leaned on each other became rivals. And then came the pivotal split. In 2019, Harry and Meghan announced they were breaking away from the joint royal household they once shared with William and Kate. No more Fab Four. Instead, it was Sussex versus Cambridge. The symbolism was unmistakable. The family was divided. But it didn't stop there. In January 2020, Meghan and Harry dropped the bombshell that stunned the world. They were stepping back from royal duties. Megxit, the press called it, though Harry would later insist the decision was his. The announcement blindsided the palace. The Queen, Charles, William, none of them had expected it. Suddenly, centuries of royal tradition had been upended by one couple's choice. And whether Harry liked it or not, Meghan was blamed. Let's pause here. Imagine you're in a family business that stretches back generations. You and your sibling are supposed to carry it forward together. Then one day, your sibling announces he's quitting, and not only quitting, but leaving in a way that embarrasses the entire family on the world stage. How would you react? Hurt? Angry? Betrayed? That's how William felt. That's how Charles felt. That's how the Queen felt. And Meghan became the lightning rod for all that anger. The narrative hardened. Meghan had driven a wedge between Harry and his family. She had taken him away, lured him across the Atlantic, and cut him off from the only life he had ever known. Supporters argued she had saved Harry from a toxic system. Critics claimed she had isolated him from his roots. And caught between those two worlds, Harry's relationship with his family crumbled. The Oprah interview only deepened the wound. Harry openly criticized his father, saying Charles had stopped taking his calls, that he had been cut off financially. He spoke of William being trapped in the system, unable to leave. These weren't just private grievances, they were public betrayals. For the royals, who live by the mantra, never complain, never explain, this was unforgivable. For Meghan's critics, it was further proof that she was orchestrating a full-scale attack on the monarchy. But here's the contradiction. Meghan often spoke of valuing family. She talked about protecting her children, supporting Harry, craving a safe and loving environment. Yet at the same time, she was accused of dismantling Harry's bond with his father and brother, of turning him against the very people who raised him. Family first in words, family fracturer in actions. That tension is what fueled the fury against her. And then came the most painful moment of all, Prince Philip's funeral in April 2021. Harry returned to the UK alone, Meghan staying in California due to pregnancy. All eyes were on the brothers as they walked behind their grandfather's coffin, just as they had behind Diana's decades earlier. The world hoped for reconciliation. Instead, the body language told a different story, strained, distant, brittle. The feud was real, and it wasn't going away. From that point on, every royal event became a battlefield. The Platinum Jubilee, the Queen's funeral, the coronation of Charles. Would Harry and Meghan attend? Would they be welcomed? Would they be shunned? Each appearance was a test, and each test seemed to widen the divide. So here's the question. Was Meghan the cause of the feud, or just the catalyst? Did she ignite tensions that were already simmering, or did she create new ones altogether? Perhaps Harry was already struggling with his role, already questioning his place. Perhaps Meghan simply accelerated what was inevitable. But in the public eye, the verdict was clear. Meghan broke the bond. Meghan divided the family. Meghan was the wedge. And that's the tragedy of it all. Because once the feud ignited, there was no going back. The brothers who were once inseparable became estranged. A father and son stopped speaking. The Queen herself faced heartbreak in her final years. And whether fair or not, Meghan's name was etched into the story as the spark that set the fire. But this feud wasn't contained to family. Soon, voices from inside the palace itself began to speak. Staff members who had once stayed silent started to share their stories. And what they revealed only deepened the accusations against Meghan, painting her not as a victim, but as a bully, a manipulator, a duchess who left wreckage in her wake. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. They were supposed to remain silent. That's the unwritten rule of palace life. Staff never speak out. You serve the monarchy with loyalty, discretion, and invisibility. You are the quiet hands that keep the machine turning, the shadows behind the crowns. But in Meghan Markle's case, that rule cracked. And once the first whispers escaped, they became a chorus of damning accusations that tore another hole in the image Meghan had so carefully crafted. For the first time in decades, palace staff began to share what they had endured. Stories leaked. Testimonies surfaced. Words like bullying, trauma, and resignations began attaching themselves to Meghan's name. Suddenly, the smiling duchess who spoke about kindness and compassion was being accused of cruelty, of driving people to tears, of leaving behind a trail of broken aids. It started in 2018, when reports emerged that Meghan had been nicknamed Duchess Difficult behind palace walls. At first, it sounded like standard tabloid exaggeration. After all, royal brides before her, including Diana and Fergie, had endured similar labels. But then came the details. Staffers described being humiliated, shouted at, and dismissed over seemingly minor issues. One aide reportedly left the job in tears after an interaction with Meghan. Another claimed the stress of working for her had left them traumatized. These were not isolated accounts. Emails were leaked. Jason Knopf, the Sussex's then communications secretary, reportedly filed a formal complaint in 2018, accusing Meghan of bullying two staff members out of the household and undermining the confidence of a third. For royal insiders, this was explosive. Complaints of this nature are rare. For them to be documented was unprecedented. Now, Meghan has always denied these claims. She and Harry framed them as part of a smear campaign orchestrated by the palace to discredit her ahead of the Oprah interview. They insisted the bullying narrative was fabricated to silence her. And her defenders argue that Meghan was simply a strong woman navigating an outdated, patriarchal system that bristled at her confidence. But here's the contradiction. Meghan publicly champions kindness, compassion, and mental health. She has spoken passionately about creating safe spaces for women, about lifting others up, about empathy. Yet, behind the scenes, multiple staffers described the exact opposite. To them, she wasn't a healer. She was the wound. Ask yourself this. How do we reconcile these two Meghans? The smiling advocate for compassion on stage and the demanding Duchess in private? Can both exist at the same time? Or is one of them an act? The Duchess' difficult stories spread like wildfire. The press relished them, turning every minor interaction into a headline. One report claimed Meghan emailed staff at 5 a.m. with demands, expecting immediate responses. Another described her anger over perceived slights, her insistence on perfection, her sharp words when things didn't meet her standards. On their own, these stories might sound like the habits of a high-pressure boss. But in the royal world, where staff were used to Kate's calm, Charles's orderliness, or even the Queen's quiet discipline, Meghan's style was jarring. And then there were the resignations. Within a year of her marriage, Meghan had gone through several key aides. Samantha Cohen, the Queen's former private secretary, was brought in to guide her transition into royal life. Even she reportedly struggled under the pressure. Melissa Toabdi, Meghan's personal assistant, resigned after just 6 months, allegedly due to the demands of the job. Each departure added fuel to the fire. To the outside world, it looked like a pattern. Too many people, too many tears, too much turnover. Was Meghan truly that difficult, or was she being targeted? Here's where things get even more complicated. The palace never fully denied the bullying reports, but they never publicly confirmed them either. They launched an internal investigation, promising to review the complaints. But the results were never published. Buried, sealed, locked away in palace archives. That silence only fueled speculation. Was Meghan protected, or was the monarchy protecting itself? And that's the irony. Meghan had accused the palace of silencing her. But when staff accused her of bullying, the palace silenced them too. It was a mirror image, each side claiming to be the victim of suppression. And in the middle stood the public, left with nothing but conflicting narratives. For Meghan's critics, the leaked accounts were the smoking gun, proof that behind the victimhood, she was the manipulator, that the kindness was a mask, the compassion a PR strategy. For her supporters, the timing was too convenient. Why did the bullying stories surface right before her Oprah interview? Why weren't they addressed earlier? To them, it was classic character assassination, a woman of color daring to challenge the monarchy being punished for her audacity. But beyond the politics of perception, one truth stood out. Staff rarely lie in unison. And too many described the same behaviors, shouting, coldness, impossible demands, for it all to be fabrication. Let's not forget the emotional element. One aide reportedly said they felt completely destroyed by their experience working for Meghan. Another claimed Meghan cut them down repeatedly. These aren't just workplace gripes. These are descriptions of pain. And pain resonates. Now, pause for a moment. Picture Meghan standing at a podium, speaking about mental health, about kindness, about lifting others up. Then picture an aide, sitting alone in tears, after being berated by her. Which image feels truer? Which one do you believe? That's the trap of Meghan Markle. The contradiction so sharp it splits the audience in two. But here's the real damage. Once staff began speaking out, Meghan lost her shield. She could no longer present herself as the solitary victim of a cruel system. Because now there were victims of Meghan. Real people, real tears. And suddenly, her narrative looked less like survival and more like strategy. And this is where her hypocrisy problem began to crystallize. Because how can someone who champions kindness be accused of cruelty? How can someone who preaches compassion leave behind a trail of tears? It was no longer just about Meghan versus the monarchy. It was about Meghan versus Meghan. And that hypocrisy, those contradictions between words and actions, would soon become the most powerful weapon her critics had. Because once hypocrisy takes root, it overshadows everything else. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. She stood before a glittering stage, speaking about climate change, urging the world to reduce its carbon footprint. Cameras flashed, applause rang out, and her words carried the weight of urgency. Yet only days later, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry were spotted boarding a private jet, bound for their next destination. The contradiction was glaring. The headlines wrote themselves. And for many, this moment was the perfect symbol of Meghan's greatest problem, hypocrisy. Because here's the truth, people can forgive mistakes. They can forgive arrogance. They can even forgive lies. But what they rarely forgive is hypocrisy. And Meghan, again and again, has been accused of saying one thing and doing another. Let's break it down. The first and most obvious contradiction was privacy. Remember when Harry and Meghan announced they were stepping back from royal life? Their reasoning, they said, was simple. They wanted privacy. They wanted to protect their son, to live away from the blinding glare of cameras. The world nodded in understanding. After all, Diana's tragic death was the result of paparazzi pursuit. Of course they wanted to shield their family. But almost immediately, the contradictions began. A high-profile interview with Oprah, multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify, producing documentaries and podcasts centered on their lives, public speeches, staged photos, magazine covers, even a 6-part Netflix series where they gave intimate glimpses into their home, their love story, their struggles. Privacy or publicity? Which was it? This is where the anger grew. Because to critics, the hypocrisy was blatant. How could Meghan demand privacy while simultaneously selling the details of her personal life to the highest bidder? How could she condemn the press for intrusion while inviting cameras into her living room? For many, this wasn't about survival. It was about monetizing victimhood. And then there's the issue of climate change. Meghan and Harry have both spoken passionately about environmental responsibility. They've lectured on the importance of reducing emissions, on protecting the planet for future generations. Noble words, yes. But the actions? Private jet trips again and again. One report claimed Harry took 4 private jet flights in just 11 days. Another revealed the couple flew by private plane to attend a climate change event. The irony was devastating. Ask yourself this. If a leader tells you to live modestly, but flaunts excess, do you still believe their message? Or do you see hypocrisy, plain and simple? With Meghan, this hypocrisy became her reputation. It overshadowed her speeches, her initiatives, her carefully crafted image. Because the public doesn't just hear words, they watch actions. And actions, when they contradict the message, erase credibility. And the contradictions didn't stop there. Meghan spoke about feminism, about empowering women, about rejecting outdated gender roles. Yet critics pointed to her pursuit of titles, her reliance on Harry's status, her obsession with royal privilege. They asked, was this truly a woman dismantling patriarchy, or one who wanted to exploit it for herself? Even Meghan's lawsuits revealed contradictions. She fought fiercely for privacy in her case against the Mail on Sunday, claiming she had been violated when her letter to her father was published. Yet, as court documents later revealed, she had authorized a friend to share details of her private life with People magazine. Privacy when it suited her, publicity when it benefited her. Now, let's not underestimate the power of narrative. Meghan's defenders argue that all public figures face contradictions. Politicians, celebrities, even royals make mistakes between ideals and actions. But the difference with Meghan is that her contradictions aren't occasional. They're consistent. They're predictable. They form a pattern. And patterns build perception. This perception of hypocrisy cut deeper than any single scandal. It turned Meghan from an icon into a caricature. Every new speech was dissected for contradictions. Every cause she championed was scrutinized against her actions. Every word was weighed against every photograph. She had built herself up as a symbol of compassion, truth, and progress. But the moment her actions betrayed her message, the entire image collapsed. Here's where the emotional spike comes in. Imagine being a staff member who worked tirelessly to polish Meghan's image, to craft her speeches, to highlight her good works. Now imagine watching it all unravel, not because of enemies, but because of her own choices. The frustration, the disappointment, the sense of futility, it's palpable. And the irony? Meghan had the potential to be exactly what the monarchy needed: modern, relatable, inspiring. But hypocrisy killed it. Because you can't modernize an institution while playing by double standards. You can't demand compassion while accused of cruelty. You can't preach privacy while selling your story. The contradictions swallowed her message whole. Ask yourself, do you believe people judge more harshly when someone falls short of their own words? Of course they do. If Meghan had never lectured about climate change, her private jet trips would have gone unnoticed. If she hadn't demanded privacy, her media deals would have seemed natural. But because she held herself up as a moral voice, her failures became unforgivable. And that's why this hypocrisy problem matters. Because it doesn't just fuel criticism. It fuels hatred. It takes annoyance and turns it into contempt. It takes skepticism and turns it into fury. For many, Meghan Markle isn't just disliked. She's despised. And hypocrisy is the reason why. But here's the cliffhanger. Hypocrisy is only part of the puzzle. Because while her words and actions clashed, there was another force at play. A quieter, more insidious accusation, one that Meghan could never quite shake. The claim that she wasn't just living in contradiction, but that she was actively manipulating the media, staging moments, and shaping her story with precision. And when those accusations came to light, they didn't just damage Meghan's credibility, they shattered it. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Picture the scene. A young actress on the cusp of royalty, photographed casually browsing through a London shop, smiling at the camera as if caught by chance. But was it chance? Or was it choreography? From the moment Meghan Markle entered the royal spotlight, rumors swirled that her image wasn't simply captured by the media. It was constructed, staged, and carefully manipulated. This is where the accusations of media manipulation become impossible to ignore. Because Meghan didn't just exist in the media spotlight. She shaped it. She understood the camera. She knew the power of the press. And for critics, this wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. Take the infamous staged paparazzi photos of her father, Thomas Markle. Just weeks before the royal wedding, images of him reading books about Britain, measuring his suit, and working out at an internet cafe appeared in tabloids. At first glance, they seemed innocent, even endearing. A proud father preparing for his daughter's big day. But soon after, it was revealed that those images had been staged with the cooperation of paparazzi, allegedly in exchange for money. The fallout was catastrophic. Thomas admitted to collusion, Meghan claimed ignorance, and the public was left wondering, had Meghan orchestrated this? Was she comfortable with manipulating the press when it suited her, only to condemn it when it didn't? And this wasn't the only example. Long before she met Harry, Meghan's presence in the media world was calculated. She ran a blog called The Tig, curating her image as a lifestyle influencer. She hired PR teams, networked with journalists, and crafted a personal brand. She wasn't just a star of Suits. She was a woman who understood that perception is everything. So when she claimed, years later, in the Oprah interview that she knew nothing about the royal family before dating Harry, many rolled their eyes. Was it believable that a media-savvy actress, well-connected in Hollywood, had never Googled her prince? Was it naivety, or was it narrative building? This is the essence of the media manipulation accusations. Meghan's critics argue that she doesn't just live in the spotlight, she uses it. That every image, every story, every candid moment is part of a larger script designed to craft her as sympathetic, modern, and heroic. Consider the pregnancy announcement for Archie. Harry and Meghan posed under a tree, Meghan glowing with her baby bump, gazing adoringly at Harry. The image was lauded as beautiful, but it was also orchestrated. Professional lighting, professional photography, professional rollout. This wasn't privacy. This was branding. And yet, in interviews, Meghan often claimed she was hounded by the media, painted as a victim of press intrusion. Privacy when convenient, publicity when profitable. Ask yourself, how often do we see celebrities bemoan the media while simultaneously courting it? It's a familiar cycle. But with Meghan, the stakes were higher. Because she wasn't just a celebrity, she was a duchess. She was tied to an institution built on dignity, mystique, and tradition. For royals, media manipulation is dangerous. Too much transparency, too much choreography, and the monarchy's very magic begins to unravel. And then came Finding Freedom. The biography by Omid Scobie and Caroline Durand painted Meghan and Harry as misunderstood heroes, persecuted by the palace and press. Meghan initially denied involvement in shaping the book, but in court documents from her lawsuit against the Mail on Sunday, it emerged that she had allowed her